Hey everyone, this is Andrew, and this video I'm going to show you how to make a song in the style of Odesza. So first, let's hear a snippet of the song, and then we'll get into it. Alright, so if you like the song, it's not actually out yet, it'll be out in about 4 or 5 weeks. Head over to my Spotify page and follow me there to stay updated when I release it, but I'll also be uploading it here as well, so you can also subscribe if that's your preferred way of getting updated. So anyways, let's just dive right into the kind of synth section, or the organic element section, and I'll solo, actually I'll start with this group here. So this is kind of the sounds that are the bed of the track. So I'll play these and I think you'll hear what I mean. So behind all the beats and the vocal chops, that's kind of like the core of the song. It's got the organic elements that Odesza typically likes to use. So in this case, I'm using Angular Strings by Spitfire Audio, using some kind of evolving string patch, and that is panned a little bit to the right, or sorry, the left. And then this other patch, I'll solo it. It's kind of like an ambient synth, and that's getting panned to the right. A little bit less, and both of these pads kind of, go from left to right channel a bit, but they are centered, left and right, so that way you get kind of this, stereo effect that is kind of ear candy. I've covered this in previous tutorials, but if you have things that are going on different in left and right ears, sometimes it's bad because the mix is going to be different in each ear, but if you balance it correctly, it can create some stunning ear candy that when you're listening, you might not notice it, but it'll just kind of make your ears tick a little bit. So when you add that on top of the this thing here, which is actually a piano from Falcon, from UVI. So I'm just using their augmented piano with one of the finger settings, which basically just means they actually pluck the strings with their fingers. So it's a very organic sound. And then what I did is I put in an auto filter, or sorry, wrong patch. And then what I did is I put in EQ on it to scoop out the lows. I cut off some of the highs to make it less bright. I'll kind of play with that as it goes so I can show you what I mean. Just wanted to take off some of that high end. I'm adding some reverb. There is reverb that can be built into Falcon under the Effects tab. But I wanted to just use Ableton because it's a little easier from a mixing perspective to have all your effect processing down here. So, that's just adding some extra atmosphere to the sound. Then I'm putting a glue compressor on after the reverb so that the whole sound kind of gets compressed as one, so the reverb will kind of go up and down in volume just like the rest of the sound. So this kind of just flattens out the dynamics, basically. So I'll start playing from the intro just so you kind of get a gist of how the song starts. And so as you notice, there's a vocal chop here. And this is actually a vocal chop from Aubit Sound from their Petit Vocal Chops pack. So I'll show you where I got that. Go to Aubit Sound, Petit Vocal Chops. Then I use a dry one, and then it's Vocal Loop 18. So this is what it originally sounded like. So all I did is I repitched it. The key of my song, if I open up one of these MIDI things, over here, there we go. So it looks like I'm doing A, C, E, A, so that's A minor, then G, this is C major, and then we have F major, and then we have G major again. So it's just a minor, C major, G major, or sorry, F major, G major chord progression. So I did have to pitch it up to the key of C major, or actually pitch it down. And if I click here, I went down 3 semitones. And that's what makes it sound a little bit different. Now if I actually select this sample, and solo, we'll go over some of the processing. And so click all these off so you can hear what it sounds like just repitched, and then I'll just start. Oh, actually, that doesn't work. Probably should put these in a rack, but for now I'll leave it like that. So I'll hit play and I'll just start turning them on so you can see how the effects actually affect the sound. So, pretty drastic stuff happening. This EQ does a lot. I wanted to cut out all of the low end, and I wanted to cut out some of the harsh frequencies here, but still boost some of the top end. Compress it to get the dynamics more even. They already were relatively even, but just to slam it even more. Put on some echo and reverb to give it atmosphere, and then I used a limiter after those effects so that it squashes them with the sound. So that just, it gels the whole sound together a little bit more. And then I'm using an aggressive filter here, which I think I actually automate at some point. So EQ8, frequency A. And then, yeah, I do. So let's see what happens there. So yeah, I'm just using that as a way to build some kind of swell. So the introduction is very, low frequency, and then it swells up at the last second. So I'll play that transition here so you can hear what that sounds like in the context of the track. Sorry, with the music. So I'll get back to this in a sec. The big change that happens in this kind of chorus section is the introduction of the drums. Now, in the intro, there are drums going on, but it's more kind of percussive elements. So I'll play just the drums here. And here I'm literally just using drum samples from Aubit Sound's Future Bass and Chill Bundle, which includes the 2 Odesza packs. And then it's in one of these packs. I think it's in the Volume 2, Foley Percussion, Percussion Loops. And then here we go. I just used Percussion Loop 1 and Percussion Loop 3, and I was already using the tempo of the song. I think I might have actually started with these loops as the base of my song. So that's those things. Now, the interesting part is when the drums kick in. Now, this drum rack I created, but it was made using Aubit Sounds from their Chain Pop bundle, which is inside of the Future Bass and Chill bundle. So just keep that in mind. Now, I'll play just those drums without the percussion. And the sound design is very simple. I just used their actual sounds. I didn't put any crazy effects on individual sounds, I don't think. There's a little bit on the hi-hats, but it's just a glue compressor on the mix. So these little extra things I did a spectrum so that I could see the frequency of the kick drum and then tune it to the key of my song. So as you can see, I have a transpose here. And then on the snare, I put a glue compressor on just to kind of even out the dynamics, kind of change the RMS volume of it, which makes it appear louder without having a peak that's too high. In terms of the hi-hats, I do this a lot in hi-hats that are repeating a lot. So if you notice in this, there's a lot of repeating hi-hats. And it can be kind of boring to just have it go constant in the same place, so I put on an auto panner, and it looks like I actually put on 2 here. I did one that's doing left and right panning, and this one the phase is set to 0, so it's actually swelling it in volume, both at 16th note. So that just creates volume dynamics and pan dynamics, which livens up the sound a little bit more. You could also go in and do velocity automation and a couple of other different things, but this is a common trick that's very easy to liven up hi-hat parts. And let's look at the groove for a bit. This is kind of the part that leads into the chorus, so I did want to keep it kind of sparse but also driving. And so what I did is I kind of used the same beat that I use in the full chorus part, except I took out the bass drums and I think I changed the ending of it a little bit to give it a fill. So I'll play that by itself. And this little fill at the end is kind of really livens up the transition, I find. Before I added that, I was kind of meh, but then I added that. I don't know, I was very, very satisfied with myself when I did. So play it with the music so you can hear what I mean. And then when that kick hits, it just creates this huge impact because you're hearing these drums without the kick, and there's not much low end. There's still a bass, but there's no sub. And then as soon as, you know, the chorus kicks in, you get this kick drum, you get the sub bass that kicks in, and of course I have the these bass tracks sidechained, so when the kick drum hits, that leaves room for them. They don't clutter in the mix. If I solo that, you'll hear what I mean if you're not familiar with sidechaining. So pretty much sidechain compression is just when you have a compressor on a track, instead of letting the audio from that track, or in this case this group, dictate how the compressor behaves, you're actually sending another signal. And in this case, I'm sending it the kick drum from this. So I went into the drum rack here, then I went to the kick drum pre-effects, and then, yeah, every time the kick drum hits, it dips the volume, and you can see that down here. So when you play it as a mix, every time the kick drum hits, it gets a nice swell effect. Also, the frequencies don't clash, which is one of the big reasons for doing it, aside from the swell effect. Alright, so now that we've kind of gone through a lot of this, I'll show the basses very quickly, and then we'll dive into the vocal chops. For the sub, I'm pretty sure I'm actually using Contact. Usually I just use Serum and put on kind of a sine wave. I'll maybe morph the wave a little bit so it's, you know, it has some harmonics on it, but in this case I obviously didn't. Right, now I remember. So I wanted to use Substance because I hadn't used it for a little bit, and this is pretty much my favorite bass plugin thing. It's definitely my favorite Contact bass library, and I just chose a kind of synthy sub bass. And yeah, that's it. I don't think I actually messed with the preset at all. I did go into this, and I, in addition to having the compressor on the group, I also have a sidechain compressor on the actual track. I might not even need this, but the extra compression definitely has it hit harder every time that kick drum hits. There's a glue compressor to even out the dynamics, and there's EQ to cut off some of the high end. Then we look at the bass tone. I'm using another Substance patch, and I put an arpeggiator in front of it just to kind of make it do like a 16th note groove. Then I have a glue compressor on just to, you know, smash a little bit, and then the compressor that's doing sidechain to duck it on the kicks as well. You know, I'm doing this on the sub and the bass, and I'm also doing it on the group. Then I have EQ just to get out the low so that this bass doesn't interfere with the sub bass. I'm using a saturator just to drive it a little bit more to get some extra harmonics. And since I wasn't filtering the top end, usually you would move this before you're EQing. But in this case, it doesn't really matter because I'm not adding I'm not subtracting the upper harmonics, and I want them to stay there. That was the reason I added this. If you're trying to cut upper harmonics, you want the saturator before because you're going to generate more upper harmonics. Alright, so now to my favorite part, which is the vocal chops. So I'll click these two fellas here, and I'll solo them, and you can hear the part just on its own. And that just loops and repeats. And then in the what I call the verse, I just kind of deleted some of these and moved some around, and then it just makes it a little bit slower. And yeah, that's all the vocal chops. Now I'll dive into what I actually did. This vocal part here that I took directly from Petit Vocal Chops is 100% the vocals in the entire song. So all I did is I just started taking out chunks and rearranging them and repitching. So if I zoom in a bit to this main layer here, and I'll double click, see that I transposed it originally on this layer, so that was down 3. So I did get it, and I doubled the speed by clicking this divided by 2 to make it half as long. And then from there, all of these are just pitched versions. So I got the sample, made it twice as fast. Here I have a little bit faster of a higher of a note. Those are, I believe, the exact same segment. Here I have that again. You hear that? That's another segment. And here I went up in octaves. Since I was -3 before, go up +12. That brings you to +9. Then it loops there. Now here I do somewhat of a similar thing. And then I have this exact same outro that I had here, except what I did is I put this kind of slow part. So instead of doubling the tempo, as I did for all these, I actually have the tempo, and I faded it in, and it gives this cool swell effect that happens right before it repeats. And on top of that, you get this kind of thing, which again is the same thing as this. And then in terms of processing, I already showed you the processing I did for this, and it's the exact same thing in these. There might be subtle differences, but so this one we've already seen. It's got the EQ, glue compressor, time effects, and then limiting and EQing. And then on here, we have EQ, glue compressor, echo reverb, and the limiter. So the only thing that's different is I don't scoop out the low end. I don't know why I don't scoop out the low end. It might have been something I forgot, but oh no, I already scoop out the low end here. In fact, the only reason that this EQ exists is for the automation in the intro. So that's why there's not that it's not on this one, because there is no automation in the intro, because there's no vocals in the intro on this track. Now, another cool way to spice up your vocal chops, and also what I did in this song, is I have all of these in the same group. So as you remember, I talked about before, for these organic elements, these are sidechained. So when I play them along with this section here, you'll hear them duck with the kick drum. If I kick here, you'll see the compressor acting. And so what happens is, since this is on the group and the vocals in the group, the vocals will actually duck every time the kick drum hits, which gets this cool dynamic effect. If I were to turn this off and play those vocals again, you'll hear that they're much less interesting. Play it with the sidechain compressing on. And with all the music and stuff, it sounds much more interesting again. I think the reason it sounds more interesting is just because the vocals are responding to the drums, and you know, pretty much everything is responding to the drums. All the synths and the bass and the vocals are getting ducked every time the kick hits, which creates this cool swell effect. The only thing that's not getting affected by the drums is this piano part, which is kind of an atmosphere element anyways. Now, the only extra thing I did, these verses do have something different in them for the chops, but it's the same idea. I just stripped out some elements. The only thing that I did different aside from that is I have a guitar loop from the Aubit Sound Awake pack. And so they have guitar loops, and Awake is inspired by Illenium. I believe it's because one of his albums is named Awake. And there's all these cool guitar loops in there. So I grabbed one. I'll solo it for you. And I have some pretty aggressive EQing going on over here. Wanted to cut out the low end, but I wanted to leave some, but I wanted to cut out this frequency, so that's why you get this weird swoop. I wanted to boost this region, but I also wanted to boost the top end, so that's kind of why you get this aggressive curve. You know, I wanted to cut here, I wanted to cut here, and I wanted to boost here and here. So that's all in my head. You know, a lot of these details in between are just kind of side effects of what happened when I boosted and cut the areas I wanted to do that to. I'm playing in the context here so you can hear what it does. Fast forwarding a little bit. The little glitch was just from my computer not being able to handle recording video and audio and playing stuff from Ableton Live, so ignore that. But either way, this is kind of the bridge section. It's an ambient piece that builds up back into the chorus. And, you know, it was a nice way to spice up the bridge and the whole track, just because instead of using the same elements, I have a brand new thing that gets introduced just for this little part. And it is panned a little bit to the right just so that it doesn't, it's in kind of a different space than everything else. It is quite delayed and reverbed, and it is heavily EQ'd, so, you know, the purpose of that was to make it gel with all this, and since it's panned a little bit to the right side, it helps it gel a little bit more, because the frequencies, you know, even though they overlap, they're kind of in a different place in terms of the stereo spectrum. But yeah, that's really it for this video. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe for more. Also, if you're into this song, consider following me on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, or also just on YouTube. I'll be uploading here as well. Thank you very much to Aubit Sound for sending these packs over for me to check out. I'll be doing more videos about them in the future, using them in kind of cool ways. I like using samples in this way where I'm not necessarily using them for the entirety of the song like I did in one of my previous videos where I made an entire song from Cymatic samples. I like using them this way where I can kind of, cut the hell out of them, blend them with synths, and really make them my own. So I think there's a lot to offer in terms of stuff you can learn doing these techniques, because it's a thing that every electronic music producer you listen to does. People sample and they make their samples unique. So anyways, yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.